Hey everyone, welcome to a special Children's Week chat. I'm Bruce Leslie, president of First Focus on Children, and I'm really excited to have today our incredible champion for children, Representative Nanette Diaz Barragán. She represents California's 44th congressional district, and we've met with her a couple of times over the years because she's consistently an amazing champion for children on just a variety of issues. And so we're really excited to have her, and she's always just a great supporter of kids. So thank you for joining us, Congresswoman.
Thank you for having me.
Great. You currently have a bill that would expand income eligibility for the Children's Health Insurance Program, which is HR 6098. Could you tell us a little bit about that bill and what's important about it for kids?
So the CHIP program, it's a successful program that provides comprehensive health coverage to low-income children. The goal of the bill is to make it easier for states to expand eligibility for CHIP to 300% of the federal poverty level without having to get a waiver from the federal government. I have had family members who have had to get CHIP for my nieces and my nephews, so I know the importance of this program. The bottom line is we need to make sure that kids have access to see a doctor and to health care. So this bill will make it easier for the states to be able to provide those services through CHIP without having to go to the federal government for a waiver to get to a certain amount. And that's what we currently have to do. If the states want to go up to 300% of the federal poverty level, they have to go to the states. So we don't want to delay. We want to be able to allow the states to be able to do that so that we can make sure our kids are taken care of.
That's awesome. You know, we had made such progress through the passage of CHIP and cutting the uninsured rate for kids for 2 full decades until the last few years. And so we really love your bill because it really will help us reverse that. Is there anything else, other issues on children's health that you see as a priority, or other issues that are really important to you in terms of things going on in Congress that we should think about and know about and support?
Well, I think there's a lot. Certainly, children's access to healthcare is at the top of that list. But when you talk about health, we often don't talk about dental. When I was a kid, I remember my teeth were decaying. I was afraid to go to a dentist. In many cases, I don't think my parents had the ability to take me to a dentist. So I have made access to dental care for children to be something that I'm working on and prioritizing. That's why I led a letter to House leadership asking for additional temporary FMAP increase that can support state Medicaid programs to continue full access to adult and pediatric dental services. I also have advocated for $75 million in public oral health infrastructure fund. It would support state and local health departments to improve oral health care delivery, prevention, surveillance, and workforce training. So, I also want to quickly mention, as the crisis persists, I've heard about the concern that children may have a harder time seeing a doctor for routine checkups, including receiving their normal vaccines that are required for school. So we need to ensure that children are able to receive the care that they need to stay safe and to stay healthy.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate that. Like, one of the things that we've been really concerned about is there's some people, they may go nameless, who keep saying that children are fine, everything's good, and we know that exactly those points you just raised about issues that are really important to kids, and kids are not fine. They're definitely falling behind on immunizations and developmental screenings and all those kinds of things. So and certainly oral health. So those are all great things. We appreciate that. I also wanted to ask you, you're one of 40 members of Congress that is that we, through kind of our elaborate scoring process, we identify sort of the leading voices and the leading advocates in Congress for kids, and give awards to our champions for children, and you're one of those, and you're always one of those. So we just wanted to, thank you. And we just wanted to ask you, like what is it that drives you? What makes you such a great advocate for kids, and what kind of advice maybe do you have for us about how we get other people to join all the great work you're doing for children in Congress?
Well, thanks. I really appreciate the recognition. And for me, it's just about doing what's right. I'm the youngest. I'm the youngest of a lot of kids, let's say, and 11 to be in particular. Sometimes I joke around and I say I was the last accident. But it's funny because for me, I've grown up, have always been in a house full of kids. And we also had family immigrating from Mexico. So I was always around a lot of kids. And one thing I remember very clearly is that there's not equal access and there are so many inequities among our communities. And that's not fair for children. Every child should get a fair shot and every child should get the equity, whether it's access to healthcare, whether it's access to housing, to education, to environmental safety. And so, number one, I tell people make sure you're engaged and you're active. Having our kids do lobby days and days on the Hill, I think are really neat. We've now seen more members of Congress do town halls with kids. I think those are all great things. But what we need to do is we need to also make sure that our kids are thinking big so that when they grow up, they too can be at the policy table making decisions. In the meantime, writing letters and helping get support on some of the bills is something that's very helpful. And many, many times, a phone call to a legislator's office asking them to get on a bill is helpful. And then sharing their personal story about why they support the bill or what the bill would mean to them. If I may just quickly, I want to just mention a bill that I recently introduced that I think is really important for kids in the grand scheme of inequities. And there's a social determinants of health bill that I just want to quickly mention. It looks at things like housing conditions. It looks at things like food security, environmental safety, and educational opportunities. And those all play a role in determining an individual's physical well-being, including our children. And so this bill would have basically grants to the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. It would give grants. The CDC would give grants to state, local, and territorial and tribal health agencies and organizations to address the social determinants of health in target communities. And so I just want to make sure that all kids have access, and super excited to be a champion for kids, and we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that piece of legislation so speaks to how great you are on sort of recognizing sort of the whole kid and sort of the needs and how all this interacts, right? So the housing, the education, the nutrition of a child, and how important that is to their health care. And I think that this move in terms of improving our healthcare system and really recognizing those linkages is like a perfect, I think your legislation like makes a lot of sense and really sort of captures that whole kid. So I really want to thank you. And our last question, I guess, would be, what kind of advice, to some of the viewers of this conversation do you have for those of us in the children's community on how can we inspire other members of Congress to be really great on the issues that you've been championing for the years, and then sort of a kind of a not related question, but I just wanted to sort of ask you this as well. Kind of all the work you've done on immigrant children's and their lives and stuff has sort of been really displaced in the news. And so I just also want to give you an opportunity to talk about kind of anything where any of that stands. I know that like the Dreamers are being considered in the Supreme Court, but there's also a lot of other issues. So anything you want to talk about that as well?
Well, thank you. I think when it comes to, legislators and reaching out, the most important is sharing your own story, whether it's of your children or having your children share their story about the impact of legislation. Many legislators have children, and even if they don't, they have family members that are children. And so there's something very powerful about being able to bring a child or have a parent tell a story about their child that will, I think, help when you're talking to legislators and trying to just have them relate to something that you're advocating for. In my instance, it's not that hard to do because I grew up in a big household with a lot of children, but B, having experienced so many inequities myself as a child, whether it was access to health care or going to a community clinic, I can relate when somebody approaches me on an issue or when I see something that's being done to our children that's wrong, and saying, look, who's going to act if we don't act for our children? So that, I think, is the most important thing, is sharing the personal story and reaching out to members on a personal level, I think is really powerful. Speaking of, when you see something wrong, you mentioned the children at our border and our immigrant children. These are children who are innocent kids who are where their parents have them. You know, all they know is they may be in a different community. It may look different. They may have people who speak different languages in them, but our kids adapt pretty quickly. And, you know, I'm going to speak out and will continue to do so when I see our children wrongly being separated from their parents and their families, something that has been a travesty and just a terrible mark on our country and our history. And so we've also seen inhumane conditions at our southern border in these detention facilities. So it breaks my heart when I go in and I see some of our kids who are sitting there with their parents, and sometimes they're not with parents, and the conditions that they have where they're not getting the proper nutrition. Maybe they're sleeping on a pad on the floor. It's very heartbreaking. And so I encourage everybody who cares about kids and who sees something wrong to speak up and to speak out, because we should not allow that to continue. And I will do that.
That's awesome. Well, I really want to thank you. Thank you for being such a great champion for all kids, which, you know, that your statement right there just completely demonstrates, and also the whole, you know, your knowledge and focus on sort of the whole array of the needs of children, not just, you know, one specific issue. You really have that sort of comprehensive approach and understand that kids don't live in silos. They have this whole, you know, need. And also thank you for joining us to sort of raise awareness during Children's Week about kind of some of the unique special needs that kids have in our society. So thank you so much, Congresswoman, for everything you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We don't have to mention this time around, but at some point, is certainly, which is big right now around COVID-19 and the systematic racism we've got happening in the country, is this injustice on environmental injustice, where our kids are suffering respiratory problems and asthma, and they can't even go out and play in their backyards because of the air pollution. And so it's really unfortunate to see. Just today, a few minutes ago, I got off of my hearing on energy and commerce, which is very specific to the environmental justice issue, which greatly impacts our children.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, just as an aside on that, one of our board members is Ruby Takanishi, and she was a professor at UCLA and headed the Foundation for Child Development and stuff. And she's had cancer, and as a child, she believes that that's exactly right. That she was subjected to environmental, you know, I guess you could say environmental racism in some respects, and so definitely a huge issue for us, and definitely something we want to lift up. So anything you do on that, we're happy to. We would join you and be happy to be helpful on. So I think that's awesome. Very important issue, and it's not awesome. It's just a very important issue that we definitely want to add to our portfolio and things that we're working on. So I'm glad you're raising it.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for all your work, and keep it up, and count on me as a partner in helping fight and advocate for our children.
All right. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Appreciate your time and all the great things you do for kids.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, you too.
Okay, bye-bye.